It's been a pretty crazy week for tech stocks. I mean, especially kind of in the legal department. We've seen Nvidia with their AI chip being banned in China. We also have updates with Meta and Google that are facing some legal issues that might be scaring investors. Now, too long don't watch. I am pretty bullish in all three companies here in the long term of things, but I do want to take a closer look at everything impacting these three giants. So let's take a closer look in today's episode.
I want to thank The Motley Fool for sponsoring this video, and check out fool.com/Jose for the 10 best stocks to buy now. With that link, you get a promotional offer for the subscription service. Now, let's continue with today's episode.
All right, so first, let's start off with our favorite semiconductor company here on the channel, and that is Nvidia. We can see Nvidia in the past 5 days, the stock is down roughly 6.7%. Now, the first update we have here for Nvidia is the United States government has imposed new export restrictions targeting advanced AI chips sold to China. And these measures require kind of Nvidia and other AI chip companies to require licenses for exporting specific products. Now, the main products impacted here for NVIDIA is the NVIDIA H20, which is a chip that was designed already to kind of bypass a lot of these export restrictions previously. Now, this caused the stock price to see quite a downturn. We can see right when the company reported, it did cause about a 7-8% drop. Now, the company is taking, we're going to look, is taking kind of like a financial hit up front. I think the biggest issue for some fear in the stock at the moment is that this is going to cause a bit of a loss in revenue for a market indefinitely. We're going to take a closer look at some of the scenarios, but first we can see right now that the two products impacted are mainly NVIDIA's H20 and AMD's MI308. Now, in forms of financial impact for NVIDIA, they're taking about a $5.5 billion charge related to this H20 inventory and purchase commitments. Pretty similarly, AMD is expecting about $800 million in costs related to the same thing, inventory and purchase agreements and commitments. So they are taking quite of a quick hit. Now, there are some questions to be answered. First, can these be sold sold elsewhere? I meant to say sold elsewhere, right? Can they kind of use this inventory and sell it somewhere else? I think the answer is yes, but it could be a little bit harder, as obviously NVIDIA in other parts of the world already has kind of like the Blackwell platform, has a lot of Hopper platforms and solutions as well. But I could see that there could be a market where they might be able to sell it at a loss. The second thing is this export restriction a national security risk or a trade war tactic? Now, the reason it's important if it's a national security risk or a trade war tactic is one, in my opinion, is reversible. If this is a trade war tactic, I think there is a possibility if China and United States come up with some agreements that this could come back into the market. Now, if it is a national security risk, then that is a whole different question. And I think that would have the likeliness of coming back online is something that I don't see happening. Now, obviously, kind of eliminating China and Nvidia to the Chinese market opens up a lot of questions as well. It's like, are you now creating such a void in a market that you're pushing somebody else to develop a tool, even if it's not anywhere near NVIDIA's solutions in forms of infrastructure, in forms of software, in forms of AI chip? You're creating the void of some other player coming in, like Huawei, starting to develop those solutions and maybe becoming another competitor outside of the Chinese market, right? That's a question. I'm not saying that this new competitor is going to be the next NVIDIA, but is it going to be enough of a competitor in the future because of this void created by eliminating NVIDIA from that market? So something to consider. I'm still very much bullish in NVIDIA. I don't see any real major pain as a long-term investor right now, but that void does give some question about future, maybe not next year, not 2 years from now, but about the future. So regardless, something to keep in mind of, and I do believe we will get some more updates after we see kind of that investigation, national security investigation that's happening in the semiconductor industry. I'm going to guess the AI chips is a special topic that's going to be focused in, hopefully, and hopefully somebody with great research will be able to weigh in some information there, and so that the current government is able to make a smart and a smart agreement, not just for an American company, but just for the future as well of how this can shape the overall ecosystem. Now, we did see AMD was also down. We can see after the news was reported, the stock is down nearly around the same 7 to 8%. For both these players, something to keep a closer eye on, but there is obviously opportunities outside of this market. Now, I am curious though, right, if Nvidia is going to be willing to maybe even develop a weaker chip, even if they sell it at a loss in China, at least to keep that ecosystem within there, to continue to grow that ecosystem, where they might say, look, I might take a hit right now on this market, but I'm going to make sure that my developers are still pretty strong here on the NVIDIA ecosystem, and then make sure that maybe that risk of a competitor in the future becomes smaller and smaller. So I am very curious to see what's going to be NVIDIA's next move after this. Now, before we go into the next company, what I want to do is take a closer look at recent earnings from TSM. They just reported earnings this past week, and they talk a little bit about what's happening in the market right now. So in forms of tariffs, they understand that there are uncertainties and risks from potential impacts of tariffs policies. However, they have not seen any changes in their customer behavior so far. Therefore, they continue to expect their full year revenue to increase by close to mid 20% in terms of US dollars. We might get a better picture in the next few months, and we will continue to closely monitor. So overall, they're going to tell us, but right now they aren't seeing any major changes. Now, in my opinion, TSM, because the chips that they create for these customers or for their customers are chips that are going to be used in future technology and future laptops, future PCs, future phones. So in my opinion, if there was any real changes happening to kind of guidance, I would have expected TSMC to start to see some changes within customers. But right now, they mentioned that that's not the case. Now, talking with the AI market, they want to reaffirm their revenue for AI accelerator to double in 2025. Here, they talk about AI GPUs, AI ASIC, and HBM controllers. I'm pretty sure that's HBM controllers for AI training and inference in the data center. So overall, we are getting maybe some bullish sentiment here from TSM. Now, the next company we're going to take a closer look at is Google. So Google in the past 5 days has taken not too much of a hit, down 1.5%, but from its overall 5-day peak, the stock is down roughly 6.4%. So definitely taking quite a hit. Again, long term, I still am very bullish on all three companies. And in my opinion, Max 7 are where it's at right now in forms of if I'm looking money to put into the market. Now, with Google, there was a US district judge that ruled that Google unlawfully monopolized the digital advertisement market. Now, we're going to see that Google and Meta kind of have similar stories. It's going to be the detail of the story that's a little bit different, and I'll explain a little bit more here. Specifically, the publisher, ad server, and ad exchange segments. The ruling found that Google's integration of its ad technology excluded competitors, harmed publishers, and ultimately damaged consumers and the open web. Now, from here, the most important thing is kind of the issue that this judge saw was with the publishers, ad server, and exchange segment. So the person where you kind of that ad technology, right? So it seems like no actual competitors were allowed there, which makes perfect sense. But the decision now opens the door for the US government to publish for structural. It opens the door. It's not a guaranteed for structural remedies, potentially forcing Google to divest parts of its advertisement business. Now, I don't think it's going to get that long. And eventually, this is something that will take multiple years, in my opinion, because another trial is scheduled to determine the specific penalties. Google has already stated that it will appeal the ruling, arguing that its tools benefited publishers and that the Department of Justice position was stifle innovation and harm small businesses. Now, remember, here is mainly focusing on the ad technology, on that ad exchange segments. That's why we did see maybe a few companies get a little bit bullish after that. In the long term, if there is some major impact, what I could see more is, hey, look, you have to open up your ad tech server, ad tech segment to your competitors. Now, I don't think that's the worst kind of issue, so I really wouldn't be too bearish on that. But obviously, something investors should consider. Now, obviously, the other thing is, like I mentioned, any form of legal battles like this is something that's going to take multiple years to really see a final answer, in my opinion. But interesting enough, we also saw Meta Platforms with something similar in this past week. So Meta stock, we can see in the past 5 days, is down about that same level, around that 6 to 7% from its peak. It's down about 10%, but I don't know why it kind of peaked that much on Monday. Actually, I think Monday was kind of a little bit more bullish scenario there, but we can see down about that 7-8%, like some of these other big tech players. Now with Meta, we did see that Meta CEO Mark Zuckerberg testify in a high-profile antitrust in Washington, where the United States FTC seeks to kind of destroy the Meta's acquisition of Instagram and WhatsApp. The FTC alleges that Meta used kind of a buy or bury strategy to suppress competition. So instead of competing with them, they ended up just kind of eliminating the competition by adding it into its own segment and maintaining a monopoly. At the end of the day, this is going to arm the consumer and advertisers by reducing the choice of innovation. So we can see, right, both Meta and Google, the main thought process is that they are creating some form of monopoly within their space and kind of creating a scenario where competitors can't compete. Now, the way that it's done is different, right? We saw with Google, the way that it was done, and this kind of ruling is it's more focused on the ad server and ad exchange segments. The way Meta Platform is doing this is more via acquisition and reducing the competitors that way. Now, the trial could force Meta to divest Instagram and WhatsApp, which could significantly, obviously, impact Meta's business. Instagram alone is estimated to generate about half of Meta's US ad revenue. So, first, as an investor, you might be wondering, oh man, if this happens, will that be horrendous for my overall stock? Maybe initially, but if something like this was to divest and they were to continue to go public, what you would get is public shares of Meta Platforms, whatever being, and whatever new entities are being built. If WhatsApp and Instagram become kind of like an individual company, you'll get kind of shares within that as well. So you'll become a little bit more diversified within these three players. And sometimes that does end up being good for investors in the long term of things. So it's not necessarily scary. Again, we are no longer, we're still, these trials is ongoing and could extend into July. If the FTC prevails, it could kind of create maybe a segment where Meta has to break up or break up some of its positions. Again, these legal issues take some time, but this is the update that is happening right now with these three players. Again, with Nvidia, we saw kind of that AI chip. Is this kind of a national security problem? Is it a trade war tactic? With Google, what can happen? Are they just going to maybe get forced to include some of their competitors into some of their ad tech technology, which is pretty weird, but whatever. And then with Meta Platforms, are they going to have to split up their business? Overall, I think right now for all three players, still very bullish, like I am mentioning. So I hope you guys enjoyed. Let me know your thoughts on the comments below, and let me know if you enjoyed this quick Big Tech Max 7 update. Take care, have a good day, and see you all next time.